In this lesson, we'll learn to assign and modify materials in Modo. So this is O8 begin in your project files. You just have a little RC car and a remote. And let's talk about now how Modo works with materials and creating different surface looks. Right now, everything is all gray. In Cinema 4D, you'd work with the material manager and you'd add new materials. There's lots of presets that you can add, and then you'd assign those and go in and change the different channels, the color and things like that. In Modo, it's going to be a little bit different. So we're going to access our materials through the shader tree. So we're going to come up right next to the item list. Here's shading. This is our shader tree. So right now there's not a lot going on in here. The look that we see on all of this geometry is coming from the base shader and the base material. Okay, and so this is actually going to be a layer-based approach. So right now everything is assigned to this base material because there's no other materials. We could come in and we could change the color by just clicking on that color and coming in here to the color picker, changing a different color. If we were to create a new material in here, so let me just right click and let's just duplicate this base material, and I'm just going to rename it. So we'll just call this test material, and this is sitting above our base material. So typically you're going to want to have things between your base shader and your base material. So the test material will change to blue, and now you can see that all of the geometry is taking on that blue color. So it wasn't actually assigned the base material, it's taking on the effect of whatever's on top of this stack, which in this case is the test material. So if we turn off the visibility of our test material, you can see it goes back to the gray of the base material. Alternatively, if we change the order, so if we move the base material above the test material, it's going to take on that effect. So think about that in terms of layers. So a little bit like body paint, where you can have different layers blended together, or Photoshop. It's going to be the same sort of thing. Here we're just talking about a couple of materials, and even that is working in a layer-based approach, so that whatever's at the top of the stack is being shown on our model. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and delete this test material. So we're back to our base material. So let's see how we can assign materials to actual objects. And so, for instance, we could come in here and say, I want to have a material assigned to this body. And so we're just in item mode. We're going to hit the M key. We can also go to texture and assign material group. Okay, but I'm just going to hit the M key. M is in material. It's going to bring up this polygon set material. Here we can create a new material, or we can assign an existing one. Let's call this one, let's create a new one and call it body material. And then if you want to, you can create a new color for it before you even create it. Make it green, say OK, and then we'll say OK to that. So you can see a couple of things have been created here. There's the material, which is just called material, and this has all the channels that we can change, just like the base material. And then there's this material group, or material mask, and this is what's determining what that material is assigned to. In this case, it's assigned to this object. Okay, and so this is sort of a group where our material and then any textures that are going to be associated with that material are going to be put inside of. Okay, and they're going to be treated in a layer-based manner just the same. So things on top are going to show through. You're going to have blend modes and all of that. Okay, and that was assigned just to this as a mesh item as a whole. Okay, so that's the material group or material mask, and it's assigned now to the car. But let's say that we want to assign a material just to parts of an object. So let's start with this part of the remote control. Let's assign a material to the whole thing as an item. So we'll go to M. We'll call this remote material. Let's make it more black, or dark at least, maybe dark gray. And we'll say OK to that. Now we've created a new material group and a new material. If we wanted to come in and change the color of this, we could. And this is what's on our remote. But let's say we want to add a different material to just these polygons. Well, we can go into polygons. Let's select the polygons that we want to add that material to. Let's say just these. We'll hit M again, and let's call this remote screen. I'm going to make this sort of a bright blue color. We'll say OK to that. Now there's a new material group here. And you can see that this whole thing has this remote material assigned, and then the screen, the polygons for the screen, have this remote screen material. And so we're starting to get all these groups, and again, whatever we have inside of these groups is going to be assigned to, in this case, just these polygons. We can also start to add layers to these different groups. If we go up to add layer, you can see there are different kinds of layers we can add. We can load in image maps. There are also pre-existing sort of procedural textures that we can go in and add. Let's say that we want to add a texture file to this object. And so we would want the texture file to live inside of this body material. Okay. We also want to check and make sure you can see the UV maps listed here under lists, UV maps. And this is the body UVs that we're using. So I want to add a layer. Let's go to image map and load image. We'll go into our project files. I'm just going to grab this body color 2 and load this in. And you can see this image comes inside of this body material group. Okay. You can see that the diffuse color is the effect. You're not seeing it in here. Now we are. And so you can change how this texture actually behaves and what it's actually driving just by clicking on this. I'm just going to right click, and I can go into the basic channels. You can see there's diffuse color, but I can also set it just as the specular color. So we're getting that green, and now we're just seeing that texture drive the specular color. Okay, let's go ahead and set this back to diffuse color. Okay, so we can come in here with that texture selected. You can see that there are some blend modes here. So we could come in and change our different blend modes, and that's going to blend it with what's underneath. We can also change the opacity. So we could take that opacity down, and we're starting to see now the material that's underneath that. So again, think of this as a layer-based approach where we can start to pile our different texture maps on top of this, and they're going to read from the top down to the bottom, and the material is going to be on the bottom. Okay, so you're going to have material, then all your textures, and then it's going to be all inside of this material group. And then to the right, the effect for each of those texture maps, whether it's something that you've painted or some procedural that you brought in inside of Modo. You can also start to add, use things like utility type textures. So we could come in and add a layer. There's like a noise checker that you can come in and add, or you can add it as a layer if you wanted to add an image. You can add an image, and depending on your display type, you'll be able to see those. So maybe if you're doing UVs, this can be helpful if you want to come in and start to create your UVs, but you want to make sure that it's not distorted. You can have a procedural or an image map of a checkerboard, and it lets you know, okay, the UVs are pretty good. They're nice and square. We don't have a lot of distortion going on. And then, you can turn off the visibility on that if you need to, when you don't need it. So you don't have to create a new material every time. So if we come in and we created a material on this, we'll call this, let's just call this car orange. And let's make it orange. Make it match that a little bit better. So we'll create that material just for that piece right there. But then let's say we want to assign these other pieces to that same material. We can hit the M key, and with that selected, we say okay, and it doesn't create anything new. It just assigns it to that, assigns the car orange to that material, or to that object rather. Okay, so go in and say I'd create one for tire rubber. Make it black, and then you could assign it to all the other tires. And then whatever you do inside of that material group is going to affect anything that has that material assigned to it. So again, you can go in here and select all these different pieces, and it assigns those. So again, it's a little bit more, I guess, like body paint in terms of the layer-based approach versus just opening up the material. I mean, the material itself, when you edit it, it's going to be pretty similar. I mean, you're going to open it up here in properties. You're going to have the diffuse amount, the diffuse color, the specular amount, a lot of those settings that are going to be kind of familiar to you. You can go in and change those. It's just going to look graphically a little bit different. the key thing is having the polygons and the items tagged with these material groups so that you know what's assigned to what. Okay, so that's a look at materials in Modo. The next thing that we're going to talk about is rendering in Modo. So how do we start to get some nice images out of Modo? How can we start to bring up, calculate our lighting and all of our materials and things and create a really nice image? What's involved in that? So let's take a look at that next.